life is often what luck hands you. Luck handed me being born into the civil rights movement, the women's rights movement. Life is mostly what is there. Maybe you can grab upon it and do something about it.
Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton today on Now I've Heard Everything. I'm Joel Thompson. A 175 years ago, an escaped slave made his way to Washington, D.C. and started a new life. His name was Richard Holmes. Decades later, his great-granddaughter would become a leader in the American Civil Rights Movement and ultimately a member of Congress. Her name was Eleanor Holmes Norton. Born in segregated Washington in 1937, Norton was actually president of her junior class at Dunbar High School, segregated Dunbar High School. Later, she attended Yale and graduated with a degree in law. She joined the ACLU in the 1960s, argued cases before the U.S. Supreme Court. In 1977, she was named the first woman to head the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And in 1990, Eleanor Holmes Norton was elected to represent the District of Columbia as its delegate to the House of Representatives. And she's been reelected every 2 years since then. Now, a few years back, an old college friend of hers, Joan Steino Lester, got the okay from Norton to write her biography. And the result was Lester's 2003 book called Fire in My Soul. And it was in January of that year that I sat down with biographer and subject to talk about the book. In just a moment, our conversation.
Come back with us now as we relive a little piece of our cultural history on Now I've Heard Everything. This interview is from Bill Thompson's 30-year archive. Enjoy.
So here now from 2003, Eleanor Holmes Norton and biographer Joan Steino Lester.
I had known Eleanor for many years, and I asked her at one point when I was looking for a new book topic whether I could write her biography, because I thought it would be a great opportunity to tell the story of not only an extraordinary woman, but the extraordinary generation that is our generation, the civil rights generation, the generation that initiated the women's rights movement and all the other liberation movements. Also a great opportunity to tell the story of a city, Washington, D.C., because she's a fourth-generation Washingtonian, and it's a city and a story of disenfranchisement that most people in the United States do not know anything about.
And Congresswoman, I'm guessing you could probably count on the fingers of one hand the number of people you would trust to do a project like this.
Yes, although Joan lived on the West Coast, I live on the East Coast, and frankly, she and I haven't been in much touch since college. But I certainly had seen her on occasion, and I knew she shared my values and my view of the world, my worldview. And I knew that I wasn't going to write my life story anytime soon. District doesn't have any senators. It has only me in the House. So I thought, well, why not?
Does it awe you a little bit to see the totality of your life and your accomplishments between the covers of a book like this?
It's a bit scary. I must tell you, the whole notion of being in the midst of your life, as far as you're concerned, and then have somebody write a book, it seems rather anticlimactic. I haven't reached the climax yet. So what is this book all about? It's also not a particularly comfortable notion. You usually don't, I'm sure, have guests who are both the biographer and the subject. And the reason is that those people usually don't speak to one another afterwards. But I cooperated with this book. I don't agree with everything in this book, and it's no press release for Eleanor Holmes Norton, but it is an admiring portrait with a lot of very deep research. Joan found people I've never known and shall never know who are my relatives, and went to the Library of Congress and did the kind of scholarly research that anyone has to admire, and ended up with a very readable book.
Mm-hmm. The list of resources that you drew upon for this book is quite impressive, I have to say.
Thank you. It was really fun to do the research. I enjoyed that very much.
Were there times when you slapping your forehead thinking, when is this project going to be over?
Definitely. I mean, it was a formidable task that I set myself to tell the story of not only a woman, but a social history of the United States in the last 50 years.
But does it complicate the task that your subject is also a friend?
Well, complicates and makes it easier. As most things in life, there are many sides to everything. And it's certainly having the access that I had is something that most biographers just dream of, to be able to ask your subject, say if your subject's dead, but why did you do that? Well, what was that really about? And also to be able to do the archival in her personal archives, that kind of research. I certainly was aware while I was writing it that this is a woman who's fully functioning in the world, and I certainly didn't want to do anything to imperil her effectiveness. But I have to say I didn't have to do much self-censoring because there wasn't much there to, there really wasn't anything to be censored.
Well, it occurred to me, not that your views have ever been less than clear, but did when you're reading this book, did you did the clarity of your own purpose in life become even sharper? It's because this is you sound like a very focused individual.
Well, remember, she talked to me. That's really what an authorized biography it is. It doesn't mean that I agree with everything in the biography. It does mean that you're willing to cooperate with the person and talk with the person. So many of the stories in the book she gets from me. Much of the background she gets from me. And indeed, much of this has been in me. If I were to write a story about me, it would be a different story. I wouldn't focus as much on my personal life and here's little Eleanor Holmes Norton and then now she's a little bigger and now she gets married and then, who in the hell cares? I kept thinking about, who in the world would care enough? That was my great problem. The whole notion of politicians who want to see more of themselves. Well, look, I want to see a good story in a newspaper. I'm not sure I want to see a book. So the whole process here seemed strange to me. But again, it's one of those processes that, and it's one that we didn't lose friendship on, not because of Joan, but because when somebody keeps calling you up and asking you things about your life when you're in the midst of trying to live your life, especially your life in the Congress, which really does not give you time to think about somebody's book about your life, go away. But she kept coming and, we would always get to where we were on track again. And it says a lot about her patience and her dedication to finishing this project, that she was never turned off by the fact that she might have to call me late at night, or call me, and in the midst of calling me, I have to go do something because of my congressional work. So it was harder for her by far than it was for me. It was psychologically difficult for me to talk about myself. I became very impatient with simply talking about myself and trying to remember what I did here and there. I could not believe that anybody in the world would care about it. I still do not believe. I think there is much in this book that nobody should care about. So the only things I think that are really important are the kinds of things that shaped my time that I happened into, shape the movement. If I were to write about myself, it'd be an entirely different book. It would really have to do far more with my life in the Congress and with my city, and far less when my mother and father went to bed and at night, and the kind of details that biographers are supposed to look for.
But 100 years from now, who will be able to say, until perhaps 100 years from now, if you had ultimately more influence as a member of Congress, or with the SNCC, or with the EEOC, or arguing for a white supremacist group in front of the Supreme Court. You've had so much influence in so many different kinds of arenas. Who's really to judge?
That is a very good point. Just because, and we who are in Congress think that's where the world goes around. It really does not. And a real sense, if history of our time is any guide, I think my life in the 60s, where the civil rights movement was in fact beginning to change our country, where the women's rights movement was being born, is probably more meaningful to my own life and to my own time than in the Congress, where day to day I may do things that are important to me and to the people I represent, but do not change the world.
You were born there was almost a synergy, a synchronicity to when you were born, so that you would come of age and be available to argue these cases before the Supreme Court, or to represent people with the ACLU, or to march here, or sit in there, or be arrested there, you were just 10 years either way, and it would have been a whole different story.
This is so important. The hubris of people thinking that they somehow made their times and the times couldn't have done without them. The way to understand this is to think about what would have happened if Martin Luther King had been born in 1910. He would have been a colored preacher that nobody ever heard of. And the same would have occurred if Eleanor Holmes Norton hadn't come to consciousness in the late 50s and early 60s in time to join the civil rights movement. I mean, you almost got pulled into the civil rights movement in time to join the women's rights movement. And for young people today, I would really want them to know that life is often what luck hands you. Luck handed me being the firstborn, which is part of why I am an assertive person. Luck handed me being born into the civil rights movement, the women's rights movement, into the times in the 20th century that were changing. If it happens, then you take advantage of it. If you happen to be born today, or if you happen to be the age of my son, you're going to have to make your way in a different way. And it's really important for those who look at these so-called role models to understand that life is mostly what is there. Maybe you can grab upon it and do something about it, and maybe you can't.
After this short break, Eleanor Holmes Norton recalls a pivotal day in her life and the life of the country.
AI is not just for 22-year-old coders. A lot of us older adults are drawing on our life experience to find unique and creative ways to use AI, at home or at work. Got an AI success story you'd like to share? Tap the link below to visit our YouTube channel, AI After 40, and let's keep learning together.
Now back to my 2003 conversation with Eleanor Holmes Norton.
There are multiple times in this book when not only are you in the right place, but you have the courage to grab onto that and do something with it.
That's what I just wanted to say, that it is true about the times and coming of age at a certain time, but also Eleanor's character is such that she has the courage to grab hold of the moment, but she also has a frame of mind, and I don't know where she got this, whether she was born with this or, it also was one that her mother had, of really looking on the bright side. I mean, even in Washington, D.C. now, she could go around just whining and being a have-not and say, look what they're doing to me. I don't even have a vote. I don't have this. I don't. But she doesn't. She always focuses on what's possible given. She doesn't shrink from saying what really is the case and the true limitations, but she always represents hope. And to me, that's one of the messages that I wanted to put across in this book, is that she is a very hopeful person who always focuses on what is possible in this situation. Let's not sit around and moan about what's happened, but what can we do now? She's an activist. And I think at this moment, when people are so hungry for hope, that's what she represents. And
how do you do that? How do you remain steely hard, but yet such a nice person that no one speaks ill of you, but everyone says you are one of the most effective people on Capitol Hill.
Well, I wouldn't call it hope. That's such an ethereal concept. I would call it determination. The way in which I guess I fight against hopelessness is to say, what can I do about it? I think you would really, if you represent 600,000 people, for example, in the District of Columbia, and the Congress can come in and do anything they want to, and you've got to just say, I'm not going to let it happen. You can't say, I hope it won't happen. You have to think, what can I do to keep it from happening? What can I do to bring these Republicans on my side? Me, a progressive Democrat. Newt Gingrich becomes the speaker. Well, you walk up to Newt and you start talking to him. And, he knows you're not going to change your views on national issues, but it is the nation's capital, and you ought to be able to talk to him about that. And that a lot of that, it may come from growing up in D.C. Remember, that was a segregated society, and I went to segregated schools, and Black people in D.C. didn't sit around thinking, woe is me, I guess it's going to be this way forever. They thought about, hey, what can we do about it?
Now, when you're speaking about your school experience, one of the passages that I just found, I sent a chill down my spine, was when you were sitting in class and you heard the announcement of the Brown versus Board of Education ruling. I'm thinking, how many of us even remember any Supreme Court ruling when we're sitting in school? But the effect that had on you, as Joan described, was electrifying.
Well, if you had been sitting in one of those schools, you would remember. And with a principal, remember these were segregated schools. Dunbar High School in Washington, D.C. actually had some people with PhDs teaching in them, because this was the college preparatory public school. Anybody could go to it that you went to. And when they ring the bell, where the principal usually makes announcements about 3:00 in the daytime and says, "Now I want everybody's attention." And then he says, the schools in which you are now sitting have just been declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. And you see teachers crying, people who are the most dignified people for whom you think tears are impossible. That is a day that lives forever in your memory. And of course, it was a very liberating experience for me, because the black community of Washington knew it would come. And so it did.
And what a feeling of power must have washed over you
Yes.
at that moment.
That's exactly what did. Not thank you, Supreme Court, not thank you, Jesus, but yes, we have in fact done it. We have persevered. That was wrong, and it is gone.
And this speaks to, Joan, what you said a moment ago about this being a larger story than just about Eleanor Holmes Norton. It's a story of America, this whole
Yes.
awakening, these couple of decades in which we collectively woke up and said, what have we been doing?
Yes.
We're going to do it differently now.
This is so important. The notion of biographies that are about people are like People magazine. If you want to know those little.
Do you have jam or jelly on your toast?
Yeah, exactly. But I don't think Joan would have been interested in me had I not, in fact, happened into the great movements of our time. And those great movements, think about it, occur rarely. Rarely. They are none to speak of now, because they're not supposed to last forever. They are spurts of wonderful energy that depend upon a confluence of events and people, and then they come, they change, and then they go. So when people say, where did the Civil Rights Movement go? Where did the Civil Rights Movement go? It's still here. But if it were the movement it was in the 1960s, we would be a failure, because that would mean it hadn't done its work. It has moved on to a different state, a more sophisticated state, where you go to the Congress and where you do the kinds of things we couldn't dare to do, like elect 39 members who are African American to the Congress. Life goes on, and we must be willing to go on with it, not live in the nostalgia of the wonderful 60s or 70s when we were young and foolish and wonderful.
Well, one of my favorites is the story of Eleanor's great-grandfather, Richard
yes.
Holmes, that opens the book. He was enslaved in Virginia in the 1850s. As a young man, he ran away from slavery, ran away from the plantation, came to Washington, D.C. The 1850 Fugitive Slave Act had just been passed, so he was vulnerable to recapture legally. He was in Washington, D.C., therefore somewhat illegitimately, working as a construction worker on the roads, and a white man walked up to him and said, "Richard," and he didn't even flinch. And the white man said, "Richard, that's my nigger. I'd know him anywhere." And the foreman just looked at him and said, I don't think so. I saw him, and he didn't even flinch. So he's obviously not Richard. And Eleanor says that story inspires her, because what foresight that took, and what practice, what discipline to practice for that day, to know it would come, and to not respond to what everybody responds to, their name.
Eleanor Holmes Norton celebrated her 88th birthday last month. She continues to fight for D.C. statehood and full representation in Congress. Now, you can get your copy of Fire in My Soul by Joan Steino Lester by tapping the link in our show notes, by clicking the link in the description below if you're watching this on YouTube, or by going to our website, heardeverything.com. We may earn an Amazon commission if you make a purchase. HeardEverything.com is where you can also find my 1998 conversation with the great Congressman John Lewis.
When I was growing up, I saw those signs that said white men, colored men, white women, colored women, white waiting, colored waiting. I saw segregation. I saw racial discrimination. But because of the Civil Rights Movement, those signs came tumbling down, and those signs would never, ever be seen again.
And my 1994 conversation with another civil rights icon, Andrew Young.
If you had told Martin Luther King after the speech on the March on Washington, what do you think of Andy Young being ambassador to the United Nations? He'd have laughed. And he would have said, well, if we can ever get the right to vote, maybe some of those things will happen.
And of course, we post new episodes of Now I've Heard Everything every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and you can find us any place you find podcasts. And thank you so much for listening. Next time on Now I've Heard Everything, my 2006 conversation with Oscar-winning actress Ellen Burstyn.
You can't really become somebody else until you find out who you are, because you have to have some strong central place that allows you to take a step out of there into another identity.
That's next time on Now I've Heard Everything. I'm Bill Thompson.